Hello, and today we're going to be talking about managing network access. That's a clever way of looking at shares, but essentially we're going to be looking at resource locations, both locally and remote. The remote is going to be a shared. Remember that sharing is the process of allowing a resource to a user across the network. So network share provides a single location to manage shared data used by many users. Sharing also allows administrators to install applications once, as opposed to installing it locally on each computer, and to manage that application from a single location if we're talking about a application share. So there are two ways to do this. We can either do it through a share wizard or through the share tab. We're going to walk you through both, but I want to go over some options before we do that. So when we have a shared option, we have things like the share. That's going to be the object. We have the share name. We have comments. We also can limit the number of simultaneous users. We can also set permissions as well as caching. Caching is going to be how the folders are cached or viewed offline. Keep in mind, only folders, not files, can be shared. You can only share a directory. Share permissions can be applied only to the folder. If a folder is shared over the network and a user is accessing it locally, when the share permissions will not apply to the local user. When we're looking at a share, we have to understand that we have both share permissions and local permissions. And we can set it so that if we're viewing the object over a share, then we will look at share permissions. If we're looking at that object through a local connection, then we're only looking at local permissions, not the share. And I'm going to go through both of those. There are three main types of permissions when we are talking about shares. Full control, they can do everything. Change, that's basically the ability to modify and delete stuff. Or read. Read will allow users to view and execute files in the shared folder. Read is also the default permission on shared folders for the everyone group, so we want to be careful there. It is extremely important that you remember that the most restrictive permissions always win, meaning whatever permission that you are granted, the most restrictive variation of that permission is going to be the one that you are granted. Alright, so let's jump in our virtual machine and let's see what we can do. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and delete my shared folder. I'm going to go ahead and make a new one. Share. I'm just going to call it share. If I right click on it, I have the ability to give access to. I can either remove access or I can do specific people. Again, if you're doing this on a domain, it's going to be slightly different, and I'll show you those a little bit later. And you're going to get a list of everyone on the machine, or you can create a new user. I'm going to go ahead and set it to everyone. Click on add, and then I can say what permission to do, read or write, and then hit share. So, if you do not have network discovery and file sharing turned on, you'll get a prompt. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm currently connected to a public network, so I'm going to go ahead and change my network to a private network and do the share. This is the share wizard. Here is my shared path. I can copy data here, share 1. Share 1. So I want to point out local path versus a shared path. So you'll notice this PC, C drive, so you'll list a directory and it'll go to the directory. On a network, it will go a // the name of the server or the name of the workstation, and then it will show you share. If you are looking at just the workstation, it will say the shared folders. You'll also notice a different icon. With our local, it's only going to show you the directory. It's only going to show you the path. And you can manipulate the permissions. So if we don't want to use the wizard, we can right click on it and go to properties, and we now have a share tab. So in our sharing tab, we have our basic share, or we have the advanced share. I'm going to go ahead and do advanced share. You can either share or not share the folder. You can play with the name. Here you can either add or remove. Here's the simultaneous users. Here's the comments. Here's permissions and caching. So permission, again, full, change, or read. And you can be more selective. Setting a share permission to everyone is not a good idea. Normally you'd set it to someone that can authenticate. Users that are on the workstation. That's better than everyone, because everyone is part of the everyone group. So everyone's a little scary. And again, these permissions are done on the fly. So what about caching? You can actually set caching rules. Only files and programs that specifically are available offline, none of them are available, or all files are available. So what does it mean by offline? So here we have a path. We have our workstation. Well, I don't want to have to keep saving to that location if I'm working, if I'm having to work on like a remote share. I may not want to always type in the path. If we're on the local machine and you go to computer, we have the ability to map a drive. And we're going to talk about map drives a little bit later as well. But since we're talking about shares, I wanted to point out that we can do a map drive even to a local share. We can do that, and we'll notice we now have a new directory called Z Drive, and it is actually masking it to our share. That way, when you save Z Drive, or even if you navigate to Z Drive, CMD, so this is what gets annoying, is you should be able to see, it doesn't always like to navigate to our share or to our map drives. So change. Yeah, it will list it, but it won't actually navigate to it. So I can do a dir. I can give the path. That would also work. And we can do directory lists based off of it or whatever we need to. You can navigate to shares, but that's outside what I wanted to discuss in this video. But I wanted to at least show you how to make a share and point out the difference between a local resource and a share resource. So, I want to point out a few more things. Again, this is the shared path. This is the direct path, because again, this is sharing it from the share location. I want to set a share permission. I'm currently logged in as student, which is part of the administrators group. I want to block students' ability to read. Again, you'll get a message saying, do you really want to do this? Because again, most restrictive applies. I don't have permission to read to it anymore. I can still navigate to it, because again, this is going through my local device. but I cannot read it. So this is one other thing I wanted to point out. What happens if we have the ability to change? So you'll notice we do not have the ability to set change to allow and read to none. In previous versions of Windows you could, but permissions are getting a little smarter, so you cannot accidentally lock yourself out of them. So again, that is basic shares in a nutshell. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out. Remember, most restrictive always wins.